Hi, loves, and welcome to the With Love Always podcast, a podcast to help you live the life you were created for. We are your hosts and your friends, Bree
and Marissa,
and we're so grateful you're here.
We pray you listen and leave feeling more inspired, encouraged, and uplifted. Hi guys, and welcome back to another episode. We're so honored to have you joining us in this conversation today. We're going to be talking all about loneliness, and even that word, I feel like it just has this sad connotation to it, and I honestly a little bit intimidated to even talk about this topic. I was just sharing with Bree about how this topic has been on my mind for a while since we started the podcast, and I think it's just because my heart really aches for people that are experiencing a season of loneliness because, number one, I've been through it, and we're going to talk all about that, and I think when you're in it, it just has such a weight and a sting to it. But even now, being on the other side where I'm not necessarily in a season of loneliness per se, it still is easy to have those feelings kind of surface at different moments, and to see that in friends' lives and even just strangers' lives, and just the thought that there are people around me that are walking through loneliness truly just breaks my heart. And so I want to invite you into this conversation, whether you're viewing it through the lens of experiencing loneliness and you want kind of comfort and words and to be brought into the conversation in that capacity, or to even just open your eyes because maybe you're not in that season, but there are definitely people around you, whether you realize it or not, that are unfortunately experiencing loneliness. But the beauty is that we get to be somebody who can change that for somebody else. And so I think that's why I get excited when I think about this conversation, because there is hope and there's just so much beauty when we can talk about how we're feeling and dig deeper to see how people around us are really doing. So I'm just going to dive right into this topic, and I want to start out with a little definition. This isn't something I looked up, but when I'm using the word loneliness, this is kind of the framework I'm thinking of for this episode. And it's really the absence of feeling a sense of belonging and connection with those around you. So as we're diving into this, I think we're quickly going to realize just how layered loneliness is. It doesn't just mean that you don't necessarily have people around you. I think it can really be due to a number of different reasons. But yeah, I guess I just kind of want to invite you into this conversation and hear, I think just starting off by sharing stories that we've personally experienced of seasons of loneliness in our life, and if there's anything specific.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I can think about for myself, like the loneliest time of my life was, I would say, my senior year of high school and freshman year of college. And I think like there's times nowadays where I experience loneliness as well, which I will get into. But when I think of like a chunk of time, like a significant amount of time, like years of my life in which I would actually mark those years of my life by just that deep sorrow of feeling lonely, that was the time of my life in which I was experiencing that. At the time, like I was just going through a lot of like family things that were really just hard and challenging and heartbreaking and confusing, because though, you know, most wouldn't say that high school age, college age is being like a child, but I think fast forward, being a little bit older now, my heart does break for that version of Bree that in my eyes was like a child. You know, I was 16, 17, 18, 19 years old. So it was a couple years into high school, and even like the beginning of my sophomore year of college as well, where I just in hindsight would mark those years of just feeling so lonely and so isolated. And it wasn't because I didn't have people around me who loved me. It was more so just my internal battles that I was going through with just things in my life, my own emotions, my own struggles. And I think specifically, I remember when I entered college and I moved away from home. I was in a new city and I was trying to make new friends, but I was also really falling into a lot of just unhealthy decisions and patterns in my life. Like transparently, I was, you know, partying and just doing and making a lot of decisions that I had never made previously. And I just remember getting to a place where I was feeling really disappointed in myself and in my actions. And even greater than the disappointment, I think I was just starting to feel really empty. Like all these things I was doing and the college experience I was pursuing was leaving me feeling really empty and made me really aware that my friendships I was trying so desperately to make were very shallow. Like a lot of the people I was surrounding myself with didn't know me aside from like when we'd go to a party together. And I think that in addition to other circumstances happening in my life at the time, I was so just like consumed by loneliness. I would say that is just, yeah, like the title of those years of my life. So I would say that was probably the loneliness time of my life. And like I said, I do experience like loneliness now, which it is so different and is so redeemed compared to that time of my life. But that's something I can kind of get into at a different point in time. But that is a time in my life in which I felt probably at my loneliness. So Marissa, I'd love to just hear from you the same. Like, was there a time in your life where you just felt the sting of such deep loneliness?
Yeah, I think very similar. Well, I feel very blessed that I grew up with like a great loving family and just a great group of girlfriends. So I feel like it wasn't until I graduated high school and then went into college that I started to, for the first time, actually experience loneliness, just in the sense of like a lot of my best friends just had moved away and gone to college and all of that. And it was the first time I really realized the importance of good community because I didn't have it anymore. And I think honestly, I struggled for, like, I don't necessarily look back and think of myself as being like lonely per se in college, but something I do remember is just struggling to find close, specifically like female friendships. I think I struggled for like all 4 of those years. Like I had people in my life and I had people that cared about me, but I just did not really feel that connected to those people. And I think a lot of it was we just didn't have like similar interests or values. And so it was kind of just like, I guess, friendships that were almost based on convenience. And so I think that looking back, I now do identify that as loneliness. But then the other time, which I think a lot of us can relate to as well, was during the pandemic. And so right before the pandemic, I got married, graduated college. We actually ended up moving in with my parents. So that was such a blessing to like have time with them. But because of that, they were like especially cautious. So we truly isolated where it was just like my parents and my husband. And we like moved away. So geographically, we weren't near friends. And we really just did not have any friends in proximity or that we saw for probably like a year or two, if not more. And so I just genuinely remember being so isolated and so lonely. And I think that's part of when I like think of the weight of this episode. I think of that period, and even though I had like these people that were my family and were so like fulfilling and cared about me, there still can be such a sense of isolation when you don't just have friendships and when you're not in proximity with people or having community to do life with. I think it just is so painful. And I just remember this like feeling in my heart that just didn't go away. Like it was just this sting and this place that just sat where I just felt this loneliness. And so those are probably like the 2 main times. But again, I think loneliness, like you never really outgrow it. I think it can surface in so many different ways. And especially if you've had like a period of time where you felt so lonely, I think it can almost be triggered by things. Like I'll even just notice randomly, like something will happen and I'll be triggered and have that feeling come up, even though I know it's really irrational and I'm not actually lonely. But I think it just can be such a sting and it can surface in so many different ways. You know, we just wanted to start by sharing that because I know you guys can probably relate, and there are just certain times in your life that are going to be especially challenging, whether it's moving or going off to college or even like even getting married, like I said, that can be lonely because you might move elsewhere, your friend groups might change. Just there's a lot of just change that happens and a lot of shifting with your friends and with yourself. So next, I just kind of wanted to dive in and say that you're not alone in your feelings of loneliness. I think when you're experiencing loneliness, it can truly feel like you are the only person in the world because, again, that feeling of loneliness can be so deceiving. And so it makes you feel so isolated. So naturally, you just kind of think, well, I'm the only one feeling this way. And I actually wanted to share a few statistics because I am a numbers girly. And I think this will actually just open all of our eyes. I know when I heard these, it opened mine. But when I was pulling surveys, it revealed that around like 60% of people in the US that they surveyed currently report feeling loneliness on a somewhat regular basis. 60%. So that is more than half of the people living in the United States in 2023, which is just crazy to me. And then 47% of people in the US reported their relationships with others aren't meaningful or aren't as meaningful as they would like them to be. So I know those are kind of like heavy statistics to digest, but I just want to say how valid and how real this emotion is and how so many people are not only have they experienced it, but they're experiencing it in the present moment. And I think social media can be so deceiving. Like, I think it can paint this picture where we assume everyone has the dream friend group, dream community, dream family, is so fulfilled, doesn't need any more friends. And it can kind of feed into that feeling of isolation and loneliness. But I just want to kind of open your eyes. And when you hear those things, I think it presents an opportunity for not only connection with others, but also understanding that people do, whether they acknowledge it or not, they're feeling the same things as you are, and therefore they want connection. So I hope that just gives you some sense of comfort that you are absolutely not alone. It's a very normal feeling, and that there's such an opportunity to connect with others and really just change those statistics, like actually become the meaningful relationships and be there for the people that are experiencing loneliness. Next, I just wanted to provide a framework of just 3 main causes, just so we can kind of differentiate it, but I'll just breeze through these. Number 1, I think, is the most obvious, and that's just when you're in a season where you're just not around people, like you're just not around friends or you don't have friends. That could be due to so many different reasons, whether it's people moving away, you moving, change in life circumstance, college, even just you outgrowing your previous friend group. Then number 2 is the lack of true connection. So like the statistics suggest it, not having those meaningful, valuable connections with people that are like-minded, that truly care about you and your soul. And then lastly, number 3, this one I just kind of made up in reference to social media, making you feel disconnected and that you're almost watching the lives of others, whether it's friends or not, from the sidelines. And so you're feeling this sense of loneliness that almost I would like to say is isolation because of how digital the world is. So maybe it's your job's remote, or a lot of you have your friendships via FaceTime, and most of your connections are over social media. There's just this like digital footprint that's causing you to feel a sense of disconnect, or I guess just overall loneliness. But I guess having said those 3, I'm sure we can all relate to them in some capacity. But is there one that kind of sticks out to you where you're like, absolutely, that is such a pain point?
Yeah, I think for me, the one that I can struggle with the most is the feeling of the loneliness that comes with emotion and also social media. But I think emotion is first and foremost for me. But actually, while you were speaking, I was like, I actually want to share this about the social media part because I know that that is such a sting for so many. And I was even like thinking about this for myself. And like I was thinking about, I've had a really beautiful past couple weeks, which we'll share more about, like our life updates at the end of this episode. But I've been traveling. I just got back from the Hamptons on I can't even think, my days are not straight, literally like a day or two ago. And I know fully that if anyone were looking at my life and what I'm sharing and the photos, that they would think that I had it all together. But what people don't see, and what I don't even think I told you not to be worried, but it's like I was literally like crying like moments before I was like getting ready to come here. And that's okay. Like that's a human experience, but it's like I say that to provide that additional framework of like just how much we really don't know the picture that social media is portraying. Like, and that's not to say just because I cried that it invalidates all these other beautiful things in my life. But I think I share that to validate what Marissa said around the statistics of like, you are so not alone. Like, we really don't know what people are going through in the day to day. We don't know the inner workings of their mind and the stings that they're feeling. And I share that just to be a reminder that it is something that we both in this conversation so tangibly feel. But I think for myself speaking, the type of loneliness that I experience the most of, which I would not say there's a frequency here at all, and that's such a praise in my life that I feel like God has redeemed so much in comparison to that season of my life that I was sharing in college where I was so lonely. But I would say for me, it is like a lack of connection emotionally. And I was just sharing this with Marissa before we started recording. So, and it's something that I've like processed, but I haven't like ever really shared. And so maybe this resonates with some of you guys, maybe it doesn't. But for me, as those of you who may know me through the podcast, I am such a feeler. Like I am always up in my feels all the time. And I am very empathetic. And I praise God for those gifts within me, because for a long time, like I remember being young, I hated those things about myself. Like I just feel so deeply. And I think I've realized as I've matured and as I've gotten older that moments in my life where I felt lonely was actually, for me as an empath, the inability to identify how I'm feeling, and also me carrying the weight of other people's emotions. I think something that I really have to work on, like really intentionally, and it can be hard for me, is I love absorbing people's emotions. I love carrying people's burdens. I love listening, and I love encouraging, and I love just being available in that way. But I think I am someone in my friendships that if I'm not careful, I can take the weight of other people's emotions so deeply that I actually have the tendency to mistaken other people's sadness or anger or stress or whatever emotion it may be as my own. And then in that place, I actually get confused as to what emotions I'm feeling. And so it's like this whole cycle of, because I'm feeling other people's emotions and experiencing other people's emotions, and I rather be available for other people, I can't in return to the friend tell the friend how I'm doing. And I've had moments in my friendships where like my friends who love me have called me out on that of like, Brie, you never like tell me how you're doing, or like you like don't want to talk about yourself sometimes, or so you always seem like you're doing okay. And I realize the older I've gotten and the more healthy I've been able to process my emotions is that sometimes my inability to identify my emotions is a form of loneliness that I experience, because I feel the sting of not being able to communicate that to my friends. And then when I'm in that cycle, I feel alone because I feel unseen, and I feel like nobody understands me, and I feel like nobody loves me, which is not true, but that's the effects of me not vocalizing how I'm doing to my friends. I hope that made sense, and I hope someone out there was able to follow along with that and like relate to that. But actually, I feel like that's been more so a recent discovery of mine in my struggles with loneliness.
Yeah, and that takes a lot of self-awareness. And honestly, I think that's even hard to put to words. So I'm so glad you brought that up, because I don't even know that like I fully experience that, but I can so see that in you. So even like if you don't necessarily, as you're listening, identify with that, you can maybe identify people in your life that would experience it that way. And again, it's what I love about this episode. It's such an encouragement to you, but it's also the opportunity for us to show up and encourage other people. So
Yeah.
I just love that you shared your perspective with that so beautifully.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it just shows too and invalidates too, like the intricacies in which loneliness can be present. Like it's not as simple sometimes as you don't have like friends. I mean, that is a big thing, but like it can be so in depth because I am someone who I'm so grateful that I am so seen in my friendships. But even in the midst of that, I can still experience loneliness just because of the intricacies of my mind. And so I say that to validate that if that is something you are experiencing, even if you feel like circumstance wise, maybe it doesn't make sense, like it's still a valid emotion to be experiencing. But I think it's the response and the experience that we are really going to encourage and try to like, I don't know, refine today because we don't have to submit and remain in that space.
Yes. And I think that so perfectly segues to the next point I wanted to touch on, which is just that loneliness is so deceiving. Again, loneliness, I would really describe it as yes, it can be a circumstance, but for the most part, it is an emotion. And I think that emotion inherently isn't bad, but I think it can create a lot of false narratives in our head that are very destructive. So that's why I want to be so cautious so that we can stop these, I guess, like phrases or even like thought patterns that can just easily arise when we are isolated. I think the number one that I find surfaces for me is just feeling like I'm not desired or chosen. I think if you're just not around so many people, or maybe you're seeing like your friends hang out on social media, whatever it might be, I think anytime I feel loneliness, I feel a sense of rejection, even when I was never rejected. Like I know how silly it is, and I know how loved. Again, I think like we're saying, you can have great friends and great people in your life. Like even how I shared having an amazing family during like the pandemic and being with them still means that amidst that you can feel the sense of loneliness because you're craving for something more. And when it's not being met, you can feel like, is this because of me? Am I not enough? Am I like just not somebody people want to hang out with? Like we just go down this cycle of feeling like it's something wrong with us, when number one, that is just like so false. Like that is never the case. But I think it's just so easy to get stuck in those patterns. And so I just really want to caution you, if you are in that season of loneliness or even just feeling that, what are the thoughts that are coming along with it? Because most likely there are going to be these lies that are planted that actually cause you to want to like isolate more. Like I think it can be okay if you want to isolate in certain circumstances for your own mental health, but I think sometimes we can feel so rejected or so not desired that we can isolate and unintentionally be rejecting other people, and we're not even realizing it. And so that is just something that I've experienced that I know is false in my own head with loneliness. There's so many though. I mean, are there any specifically that are coming to your mind?
Yeah, I love what you said about the isolation part because that's actually something I forgot that I can do sometimes. I mean, y'all, well, some of y'all know, some of y'all who may just now be tuning in may not know, but I just started living by myself. And I love living by myself. It's so fun. But I think like as someone who does like cherish my alone time, I'm not saying so much like since living alone. I think this is a pattern I've had in myself for like throughout my adulthood. But I think when I feel emotionally not supported or emotionally not seen or validated, I isolate myself, and I'm like, what I think I need is more alone time and more time to be by myself and more time to not talk to other people, whatever it may be. And while alone time is so great and so special, and I would say necessary, regardless of extrovert or introvert, I think I've also, as I've gotten older and have like seen the deception and the lies that loneliness can bring, is that like the only reason why I want to isolate myself is because I'm falling into the lie that I'm not loved, or I'm falling into the lie that I'm not seen. When in reality, it's not that I'm not loved, it's not that I'm not seen, it's that I'm not sharing what I'm going through to provide the opportunity for someone to see me, to provide the opportunity for someone to encourage me. And this is just pertaining to my own life and like my own cycles. And I once again cannot reiterate enough like how intricate the human mind can be. But like on behalf of loneliness in my life, that is where I've seen myself like fall into those unhealthy patterns at different points of, because I'm taking on other people's emotions, I can't express how I'm doing to my friends, which then produces this feeling of my friends don't really like care about me and they don't really understand me and they're not really checking in on me, which then leads me to isolate myself. And it, like, as I'm sharing that, it's like you can like hear the unhealthy pattern that is like producing.
Mm-hmm.
And that is where it's like I have to snap out of like, wait, maybe the thing that would be best here is not to isolate myself, not to spend more alone time, but to be humble before a friend and like share, I am struggling with this and I didn't really realize I was struggling with this, but like I need to talk to you about it. And providing the opportunity for other people to be there for me is actually the thing that I need more than the isolation. And that's, like we said, is like that is just one, in my experience, example of how deceiving loneliness can be. It really can just multiply lies in your head to make you feel like you're not loved and you're not worthy and you're not seen and you're not good enough and no one cares about you, and you can be in a crowded room of people that love you and still feel all alone.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it does actually, at least in my experience, like I said, require a level of humility to be like, I'm going to surrender this lie, as painful as this feels, and choose to believe it to not be true, because it's likely not, and be humble before someone. And I guess more so be vulnerable before someone of like, I'm really struggling with this, or I really need support here, and like asking for that help. And at least in my life, every time I've done that and like extended that like hand and asked for help to a friend, and then I see and witness how much this friend loves me or how much my parents love me or whoever it is, it like actually like shakes me and wakes me up to realize like I was never lonely. I was never not worthy. I was never not good enough. I was just like falling into the deception of the way I was feeling.
That's such a good point. And I think vulnerability is such, again, it's not like a quick fix to loneliness by any means, but I think it is the number one thing that we have to do is like be brave enough, because I think it takes such bravery to admit that you're lonely or you're feeling those feelings, and to share that with somebody you trust and to give them the opportunity to love on you, because I think that's what we all want, is somebody to give us the opportunity for us to get to love them and to show up for them. And sometimes we wait around just hoping people will do that on their own. And life gets busy and it's hard to always check in. Like, I think we just need to remind ourselves of that and give somebody else the opportunity to show up, because I think people are just so eagerly waiting for that. And that does kind of bring me to, I guess, kind of towards the end section of this podcast, and just kind of practically like what to do if you're experiencing loneliness. And I do want to make an entire episode on how to make friends, how to find community, because I think there's so much validity in that. But just for the sake of today's episode, I feel like there are three main things that I would like to tell myself in those seasons of loneliness that I just remind myself of now. And the number one is learn to treasure your alone time, because on the opposite end of the spectrum, I think it's so easy to feel loneliness at this age, but it's also so easy to feel so overstimulated, overwhelmed, emotionally drained, all of these things that come with just being around people so often. So I think loneliness can actually be a blessing and a chance to sit down with yourself, work on yourself, pick up a new hobby, actually invest and figure out, what are my values? What's my purpose? What are these things that I want to do? Maybe it's like finding a new job, going to grad school. Like, there's so many things that we can use this extension of time and focus on. And I think if you have an abundance of time in your loneliness, to apply it towards something that gets you excited and something that you can look forward to, rather than seeing this extra time as kind of a burden. And then number 2, just to be proactive. This is something I had to learn the hard way. Don't wait to be invited. Be the person who invites. I think it's so easy. Maybe honestly, like I mentioned in high school, I just had a great friend group, so I wasn't having to initiate these invitations. And it wasn't until I actually realized I need to actually start to be that person, and I'm just going to invite people, and they feel so seen and so eager to show up in that. So it takes some courage, but just if you're feeling lonely, invite people beyond your circle, just invite people into your life. And then lastly with that, don't be afraid of rejection. I was so intimidated by the fear of being rejected when I started to put myself out there and seek new friendships. And I now have realized that if somebody ever rejects me, it's ultimately a blessing from God and it's protection. Mm-hmm. And so I think rejection is such a silly thing to stand in the way of the opportunity to meet and find your people. And also just kind of like dating, it's an inevitable part of friendships and getting out of the cycle of loneliness. There's always going to be rejection in some form, and it has nothing to do with you and everything to do with those people. And so just don't be intimidated by it or discouraged if that is the case. But yeah, those are some of my tips. Do you have any tips for people?
I think you nailed those so beautifully. I think my additional tips is, if you are in the face of loneliness, whatever the source may be, kind of like we were talking about the deception of loneliness, is I just really deeply encourage, be so present with that emotion and that feeling of loneliness, and do your best to dissect it, find the source of it, recognize what is a lie and what is truth, and be really aware, because I think the number one thing that we can do to multiply loneliness in our life is to just allow it to continue. And at least for myself, the more that I implemented healthy thought patterns and healthy ways that I could be self-aware, the more that I could stop loneliness in its tracks. Kind of like what I was sharing, when I feel like no one understands me and I'm not seen and nobody listens to me the way that I listen to them, all these selfish lies start brewing in my mind. And when I stop and pause and be like, okay, this is how I'm feeling, I'm going to validate it. I'm going to hold and embrace this emotion, but let me dissect it a little bit. Oh, I'm feeling like nobody's listening to me and nobody is understanding me. But guess what? I'm not sharing. And that is also on me. And that conclusion can only be formulated when you actually get really real and raw and honest with the source of your loneliness. And I think something that I do so tangibly with my own inner self-talk is when I hear something negative in my own mind or heart or spirit, I really differentiate of that's a lie. That thought, it does not need to take authority in my mind. And I think the more that we begin taking those thoughts captive, of the loneliness and the effects and the lies and the disbelief in yourself that you may be experiencing because you are feeling lonely, the more you start taking those thoughts captive of right now you feel unworthy and you feel unchosen and you feel unwanted. And you're but that's not true of me. You are chosen and you are wanted and you are deserving and you are loved. But that's kind of what we always talk about in so many episodes. It's like a muscle that you have to start working on in your mind. And so that's a really big encouragement from me. I would also say just a simple encouragement of like, just take heart, because in an instant, your season of life could change. Like God, I always say God is a God of suddenlies. And like all of a sudden, you could meet your best friend. And all of a sudden, your worst day could turn into your best week or your best month or your best year. Like seasons are always changing. And I think back to when I was so young in high school and in college, and I was just devastated. Like I felt like there was no hope with the season of life I was in. And I almost like wish I could sit down that version of me and like fast forward to now and like show her like what was available and what was ahead, and all the which ways my life would twist and turn, and all the people I'd meet along the way who would love me so well. I would be in such disbelief. But that's the thing. It's like, that is the beauty of life. Life, it can be really painful in different moments, but just as there's pain, there is gonna be beauty. And so maybe it's cliche, but just to sincerely believe that your season of loneliness will change, and it can change, and your all of a sudden moment is on its way towards you.
That's so beautiful. That is honestly exactly how I would love to just end this episode, is just that encouragement. And I think you put it so well, just reminding yourself of that. And I feel like when you're in that season, it feels like forever. I remember that's how it felt for me. Just when you're sitting in it, it feels permanent. But loneliness is so fleeting, and it leaves as quickly as it came on. Like it truly can change so fast. And I really believe the best is yet to come. And there's so many people, like the best people in your life and the best community lies ahead of you. And I really just believe there's abundance and there's more that's in your future. And just, if nothing else, to hold on to that hope and be reminded that that's what's in store for you. And I know that gives me peace in my feelings of loneliness. And so I just want to end on these two verses that I just want to read over all of us. And it's Psalm 34:18. The Lord is close to the brokenhearted. He rescues those whose spirits are crushed. And man, does loneliness feel like a crushed spirit. Like that perfectly describes it. And it's so just such a great reminder that God wants to draw close to us. He wants to meet us where we're at. And I've seen God take hold in my life the most when I'm at my loneliest, because I realize He's been with me all along. I just didn't see it and I didn't receive it. And so I hope that, if nothing else, that opens your eyes to the love and abundance that's available for you in your relationship with Him. And then also just Matthew 28:20, and be sure of this, that I am with you always, even to the end of the age. You are never alone. Even if you feel those deceiving feelings that tell you are, that is not the case. You are never alone, and you are always loved. And if nothing else, you have us to share this friendship and conversation with. So we hope you guys just feel encouraged in this episode. We hope that you change somebody else's story and you be the reason why they no longer are experiencing loneliness. And we just pray God places you in beautiful friendships, beautiful community that is so ordained by Him and just fills your soul. That really is something we so desire for you. So for Love Notes this week, because you guys really are our friends, I just wanted to have a conversation like friends. So we don't really know what we're going to share, but I just want us to do a little life update. Honestly, Brie and I haven't really had a chance to truly just sit down and catch up. She's been traveling for the last couple of weeks, and so it feels like that.
It does.
And we'll try to keep it just super quick, but I would just love to know, I guess, whatever you want to share, honestly, whether it's your travels, a highlight, even it can even just be something else that's so random.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, there's so much to catch up on. But for me, I mean, life has just been so on the go in the most beautiful way. I'm so grateful and so blessed to return back to LA and call it home, because that is equally as much of a blessing as everything I'm about to share. But I was in Europe for almost 3 weeks, and I originally went to Macedonia. Actually, one of my good friends here in LA, Lauren, actually invited me to be her +1 to a wedding in Macedonia. So decided to go to Macedonia, and then we were like, let's just make a whole trip out of it. So ended up traveling through Croatia for the rest of our trip after the wedding. And this is a pretty weighty statement for me, because anyone who knows me personally knows how much I love Italy so much. But truly, after exploring Croatia and being in the Adriatic Sea, swimming every single day, all the amazing seafood, I think that was my favorite part. The cuisine was incredible. Like, truly, Croatia has become one of my favorite countries I've ever been to. I just think all the memories that I now get to cherish and keep and take a hold of, like, I mean, I think that's just the beauty of travel. Like, it inspires you so much that even in my mind as I'm like talking, like, I have images in my head of the things I saw and the places I swam and the food I ate, and it was such a beautiful time. And one of my favorite places I went to in Croatia was the island of Vis, which is where Mamma Mia 2 was actually filmed. It was so beautiful. And I would say my favorite souvenir from Croatia, which I didn't wear it today, I'll wear it in a future episode, but I got this really beautiful cross necklace, and it's like real gold, and I'm so bad with the names of gemstones. Oh, it's opal. It's like opal in the cross. It's so beautiful. It's definitely a little bit of an investment, but it was something that was so beautiful and caught my eye, and something that, like, I know will be an heirloom that I could actually give to, like, my future daughter one day.
I love that.
And it makes me so excited to think that because she's a beautiful piece of quality jewelry, that I will be able to pass this on to my daughter one day, that I hopefully have. And like, I'll get to tell her the stories of like when mom was young and in her 20s and traveling. So that was really special to me. And then I got sick for the past 2 weeks after Croatia. I have speculations that I might have had COVID in hindsight. And then I just got back from the Hamptons. So I was in Croatia for almost three weeks, sick for 2 weeks, in the Hamptons for work. Such a blessing. And now I'm back. And so those are some of my bigger updates. I've just been all over the place in the most beautiful way.
Yeah, that's why I think it's been maybe like 5 or 6 weeks.
Yeah.
Since we've actually sat down and recorded and honestly just seen each other.
I know. It's
been wild.
It's been wild.
That's amazing. That gets me so excited when you were describing that. Well, number one, I wanted to say, Bree so beautifully documents her travels. So I'm like, I love that you captured it in such a beautiful way. But then that actually, like, people can go and see your travels and like witness all of that. But also you'll be able to share that like with your kids and like maybe even take them there. And like, I just so see that in your future for you. Like, that's just going to be so amazing.
Oh, thank you. That's so kind. But yeah, those are my updates.
Okay, my updates, I'm trying to think. Honestly, it's been a lot of family time, a lot of time with John's family. So they live out in Missouri and they have a house that's near a lake there. And so we went and visited them, and they just bought a boat, which was so fun. I'm like new to lake life, so I learned how to wake surf. That was super fun. Just great quality like family time. We booked the trip like 3 days before we left, which for me being such a planner, it was like very spontaneous. So that was super fun. And then actually like something that was unexpected was when we got back, something about wake surfing, I like got the itch to surf, which is so silly saying that. Yeah, because I'm like, I've lived here my whole life and I just never surf. And I don't know why that got me so enthused to like get out there. So I was like, I just want to go out. And then John was like, you should really get a wetsuit so that you have like a fun time when you're going out there. I was thinking this was going to be a one-time thing. And then once I like spent the money for a wetsuit, because it is a bit of an investment, I'm like, okay, well, I need to actually like learn how to surf now. Like I need to use this. And so I've gone maybe like 4 times now, and it is so much fun. I regret, I'm like, why did I not do this sooner? I'm so annoyed at myself, but it's never too late and we're still young. So that's been super fun. And then his sister has come and stayed with us this past weekend. Then his brother came and stayed with us for a week. So it's just been a lot of family time and just a lot of like fun summer activities. So I feel like it was like summer break for me. I've just been having the best time, but now I almost feel like I'm going back to school. Like everyone's back at school and I'm like, back to work I go.
Oh, that's so fun. That's also one of my updates. I officially have my own surfboard now.
Which also
we're going.
I'm so excited because I'm like, we have to surf together, and your board is better than my little foamy. I'm like, that's a good board to learn. I'm excited.
My baby girl is beautiful. I can't wait. I haven't taken her out yet since she was gifted to me.
We will definitely be documenting that and keep you guys updated. Shoot us a DM and let us know what's going on in your life. I don't know if anyone's actually going to do that, but I would love to know. So that way it can just remain an open dialogue and friendship. And we just hope you guys feel so seen and encouraged by this episode. And we love you so much. And we really are praying for you and praying for just your life and what's ahead. And I'm just excited to hear just the beautiful moments that lie ahead that we get to share with you. So
yeah, we love you guys so much.
See you in our next episode.
Bye.
Thank you so much for listening. We pray this episode was encouraging and life-giving. If you found it valuable, please share it with a friend, leave a review, and subscribe.
And be sure to follow us along over on Instagram at With Love Always Podcast. Signing off with all of our love always, Bree
and Marissa.